She took her twins to a free clinic. The CEO funding it was their estranged father. The clinic was free until I saw whose name was paying for my daughter's breath. Every unpaid bill, every midnight cough I pretended wasn't serious, slammed into one truth. The man who abandoned me pregnant was quietly funding the room, keeping his own twins alive. He didn't know their names. He didn't know their faces. But every scan, every inhaler, every doctor's hand on their small backs had his money behind it. And when he finally walked through that door and saw two little girls looking back with his eyes, I had to decide in front of them whether to protect them from their father or let them watch who he really was. If you've ever kept a man's name off your grandchildren's lips to spare them the hurt you lived through, you already know this isn't just his story. Stay with me, because by the time we walk back out of that clinic, the man who left won't be the only name they call him. My fingers tightened around the clipboard so fast the cheap plastic creaked. Olivia sat on my left, heels thudding an impatient rhythm against the metal chair leg. Emma sat on my right, swinging her legs just as fast but out of sync, like they were twins in everything except timing. The waiting room smelled like disinfectant and orange-scented hand soap, that sharp, clean smell that tries to cover the truth. People only come here when something is wrong. Crying toddlers. Tired parents, a baby fussing somewhere behind me. The air conditioner hummed too loudly, but there was a damp heat at the back of my neck that had nothing to do with the weather. Because there are names you spend years burying. Names you learn to walk around like broken glass. Roy Bellery was one of them. Olivia nudged me with her elbow, eyes narrowed. Mom, why are you shaking? I forced my fingers to loosen, one by one, and made myself breathe through my nose like some article had told me to do when everything in you wants to run. Just a little cold, sweetheart. It was a lie. I was burning. On the wall across from us, a faded poster showed a cartoon lion washing its paws under a smiling faucet. Clean hands, healthy kids. Below it, a bulletin board sagged under layers of flyers, free parenting classes, food pantry hours, grief support typed in thin black ink on colored paper. All the quiet ways people admit they need help without saying the words out loud. I hadn't come here for charity. At least that's what I told myself. I came because Emma's cough had hung on too long, low and rattling, especially at night. Because Olivia's inhaler was down to its last reluctant hiss, and the pharmacy bill last month had already bounced my account into the red. Because the new insurance plan at work came with a deductible so high it felt like a cruel joke. Single motherhood doesn't leave a lot of room for pride. It does, however, leave a lot of room for fear. And if you're listening to this thinking, I know that waiting room. Maybe not the same walls, but the same fear, then stay. And if you want a place where women who've carried too much for too long can breathe together for a few minutes each week, you can subscribe. Not as a favor to me, but as a little promise to yourself that your story matters too. 49,048. The nurse blue scrubs, tired eyes, ponytail a little too loose gave me an encouraging smile. You're all set, Ms. Baratraun, you're lucky you came today. The Bellery Foundation is covering everything for kids. There it was again, that name, Bellaris. My stomach clenched. 11 years of silence cracked like thin ice in my chest. Back then, he wasn't a foundation. He was just Roy, the man who drank burnt coffee because he always forgot to turn off the old drip machine. The man who waved his hands in the air when he talked about changing the world with code and stubbornness instead of money and headlines. The man who kissed my forehead and promised, "We're in this together, Annie, no matter what." That was before the promotion, before the late nights turned into disappearing weekends. Before we quietly became I every time he talked about the future. Mom, Emma's voice came out scratchy, that same cough curling at the edges. Can I have a mint? I glanced down. Her dark brown eyes, his eyes were already on the candy bowl at the reception desk, where cheap peppermints gleamed in a cloudy plastic dish. Olivia followed her gaze, then looked back at me, reading my face the way she always did, 10 years going on 30. After the doctor, maybe, I said softly. Let's get that cough checked first, okay? She nodded, then tucked her small hand into mine. Her palm was warm and a little damp. Another reminder that I couldn't afford to be weak right now. They needed me steady. They always had. What they didn't know what I'd worked a decade to hide was that once upon a time, I had needed someone too. And he had chosen something else. The nurse called our name again, gesturing toward the hallway. Exam room 4, down to the left. I stood, knees aching from the cheap vinyl chair, and gathered our things. My oversized canvas bag fraying at the seams, the folder with their immunization records, the half-finished homework packets. Olivia slicked on her too small jacket even though it was warm outside. Emma forgot hers on the chair, as usual. I looped it over my arm without a word. We followed the nurse past a row of closed doors. Behind one, a baby wailed. Behind another, a man coughed so hard it rattled the thin walls. The floor tiles were off-white with little blue specks, worn in the path where countless worried parents had paced before me. This place carried a strange dignity, people doing their best with what they had, trying not to look at each other's worn shoes or tired faces too closely. Twins? The nurse asked over her shoulder, glancing back with a quick smile when she noticed how closely the girls walked together. Yes, I answered, the word too quick, too practiced. Identical. Runs in the family? There it was. A simple question most people answer without thinking. I swallowed. I wouldn't know. Her smile faltered for just a second, then returned, softer. Well, they're beautiful. In the exam room, the paper on the table crinkled loudly as Emma climbed up, testing the bounce with her heels. Olivia hovered close to the wall, fingers tracing the laminated chart of the human skeleton like she could memorize the whole body if she just stared hard enough. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The blood pressure cuff hung slightly crooked. Someone had stuck a dinosaur sticker near the light switch, half peeled at the corner. It was all so ordinary it almost calmed me. Almost. Then I heard it. Through the thin wall to our right, a man's voice drifted in low, steady, with that familiar edge of intensity that used to both thrill and exhaust me. The door to the next office wasn't fully closed. It stood a few inches ajar, just enough for sound to slip through. We expand pediatric access first, the man was saying. No cameras. No press. This isn't about optics. My heart stumbled. That cadence. That mix of conviction and control. For a moment, my brain tried to lie to me, to wrap the sound in coincidence and wishful thinking. But some things you don't forget, no matter how hard you try. I stepped closer to the shared wall, pretending to adjust Emma's collar. My pulse pounded in my ears. Olivia's eyes flicked to my face, sharp as always, noticing the shift. "Mom," she whispered, "you look weird." "I'm fine," I said, but my voice came out thin. The nurse Amanda, her badge red finish noting their heights on the chart, and smiled. "Dr. Michaels will be right in," she said. "You're in good hands today. The Bellary Foundation has been generous." That name again. Bellary. You know that moment when you're already standing, but it feels like the floor drops out anyway. That's what it was like. 11 years collapsed into a single heartbeat. I remembered a cracked coffee mug on his old desk that said "World's Okayest Programmer." The way he'd laughed when he showed it to me. The way he'd gone very, very quiet when I told him I was late, and the test had turned pink faster than I could blink. He hadn't yelled. He hadn't called me names. He had just shifted, pulled back, started using words like timing and pressure and investors as if our baby were a scheduling conflict instead of a life. "Later," he'd said. "We'll talk later. We'll figure it out later." Later never came. I left with 2 heartbeats inside me and his number already disconnected. A door clicked in the hallway. Amanda stepped out for a moment, her footsteps fading. Through the gap of the not-quite-shut adjoining door, the man's conversation ended, chair legs scraping softly, papers rustling. Then I heard footsteps, growing closer. "Girls," I said quietly, my throat suddenly dry, "stay right here, okay?" Olivia frowned. "Where are you going?" "Nowhere," I lied. "Just stay close." The hallway noise swelled as the door to the adjacent office opened wider. I turned, already knowing before I saw him. Some people you feel before you face them. He stepped into view, gray at his temples now, suit that probably cost more than my old car. Jawline sharper, shoulders broader, but those eyes, the same dark brown I saw every morning, multiplied by 2 at my kitchen table. Rai Bellaris. His gaze moved automatically, scanning like a man used to taking in rooms in one efficient sweep, past the sink, past the chart, past me. Then he saw them. 2 girls, 10 years old, one on the table swinging her legs, one by the wall hand frozen over a laminated skeleton. And in that long-stretched second, I watched it happen. Recognition, confusion, shock. Like someone had held up a mirror he didn't know he'd been avoiding for a decade. "Annie?" He said, my name catching in his throat like it hurt. Olivia's head snapped toward him. Emma stilled mid-swing. There are moments you prepare for in your head, 100 different ways lines you rehearse in the shower, comebacks you whisper into your pillow. This was not one of those moments. I should have turned away. I should have walked out. I should have protected the quiet little life I'd built without him. Instead, I stood there, every unresolved year burning behind my ribs, and let the past walk straight into the room with my children watching. "Mom?" Olivia's voice was barely a breath. "Who is that?" Roy's eyes were fixed on their faces. His hand braced against the doorframe like he suddenly needed help standing. And in that tiny, echoing exam room between the cartoon lion poster and the crooked blood pressure cuff, I felt something clear and sharp rise up in me. 11 years of doing it alone. 11 years of late nights and empty holidays at inhalers I wasn't sure I could afford. 11 years of watching his eyes blink back at me from two little girls who had never once heard his name. I didn't plan the words. They simply stepped out of my mouth, steady and undeniable. "They're yours." His fingers slipped on the doorframe. For a moment, the great Roy Bellery, the man whose name paid for this clinic, whose foundation generously covered my daughter's care, looked like he might actually fall. He opened his mouth, closed it again, swallowed hard. "How old?" he managed. 10. His gaze flicked between them, searching, cataloging, as if looking for proof he already had. Twins? Yes. Behind me, Olivia's hand found Emma's without looking. They were breathing too fast. So was I. The room felt impossibly small now, the air too thick, the buzzing light suddenly loud enough to hurt. Somewhere down the hall, a child laughed high and carefree. In here, everything was heavy. Roy's voice dropped to a hoarse whisper. Why didn't you tell me?" And that was the question, wasn't it? The one he should have asked 11 years ago when "we'll talk later" turned into nothing at all. I let out a short, humorless sound that might have been a laugh if it hadn't tasted so bitter. "You didn't listen the first time," I said quietly. "Why would you have listened then?" His face crumpled, that polished CEO mask slipping just enough to show the man underneath the one who had once shared burnt coffee and impossible dreams with me. Amanda's footsteps were coming back down the hall. The girls' eyes were wide, flicking between us like they were trying to put together a puzzle they never knew existed. And right there, in that cramped little room funded by the man who had walked away from me before he ever knew them, one truth settled in my chest with cold, clear certainty. Whatever happened next, whatever he said, whatever he offered, whatever regrets he suddenly discovered this moment had already changed everything. Because now he knew. Now they knew. And there was no going back to a world where his name was just something printed on the wall. And if you're still here with me at this point, you know moments like this don't come with a script. So tell me in the comments, would you have said it that bluntly? They're yours. Or would you have walked out? Your answer might be the one another woman needs to read tonight. And if you don't want to miss how this plays out, how a man who funded a clinic met the children he never knew he'd left go ahead and subscribe. Not for the drama, but for the reminder that our lives don't end where they break. Amanda lingered in the doorway a second too long, eyes moving from my face to Roy's and back again. She didn't know what she was seeing, but she could feel it like anyone feels the pressure in the air before a storm breaks. "I'll give you all a minute," she said finally, voice softer than before. "I'll let Dr. Michaels know you're ready." The door clicked shut, and the room shrank. Roy's hand stayed braced on the frame, knuckles white. He looked like a man who just realized the house he'd been living in was built over a fault line. 10, he repeated under his breath. "You said 10. I didn't answer. I could not without going back to the day those years started counting. It's funny how fast your mind can leave your body. 1 second I was in that exam room with buzzing lights and dinosaur stickers. The next, I was standing in a different hallway, a different lifetime, clutching a different kind of test result. Back then, he didn't wear suits. He wore the same 2 faded hoodies and a rotation of joke t-shirts about code I still don't understand. The first time I ever saw him, he was asleep. I was 23, exhausted after a double shift at the cafe, just trying to finish a business assignment before my brain shut down. The campus computer lab was full midterms week, but in the far corner, one guy sat slumped back, earbuds in, screen glowing with lines of code and a half-finished email. A paper coffee cup sat next to his keyboard, ring of brown around the inside, long since gone cold. I almost turned around. That he snored, just once, loud enough that the girl next to him jumped. He startled awake, knocking the empty cup over, eyes wild. What? I'm up. He saw everyone staring and flushed, raking a hand through his hair. Sorry. Long night. Something about the way he said it, half embarrassed, half amused, made me smile before I could stop myself. He caught it, unplugged his earbuds, and stood as if it were the most natural thing in the world to give up his spot. You want this one? He asked. My brain's fried anyway. You were here first, I protested, even though I desperately needed that computer. Yeah, he said, slinging his backpack over one shoulder, but you look like you're actually going to pass something today. I just broke my entire code base with one line. I deserve a timeout. I slid into the chair. Thank you. I'm Roy, he said. Annie. He leaned on the divider, glancing at my loading spreadsheet. Spreadsheets, he sighed. Brutal. Don't worry. Capitalism will thank you. I laughed. Is that what you tell yourself when you break your entire, what did you call it, coat, Baz? He winced, but there was a spark in his eyes. Someday it'll be the backbone of an empire. Right now it's a very angry pile of bugs. That was Roy before success. Before foundations and plaques and his name on clinic walls. Just a man who lived on burnt coffee and big dreams and knew how to make me feel seen in a fluorescent lit room where I'd mostly felt invisible. We didn't fall in love in one moment. We drifted there on late nights at the cafe where he camped in the corner with his laptop, on walks home where he insisted on going the long way because the streetlights on Maple flicker and you hate flickering lights. I mentioned it once. He remembered. He'd show up with sandwiches when I forgot to take my break. He'd drag me outside to sit on the library steps just to let your brain remember what the sun looks like. He talked about the app he was building, some platform to make healthcare less terrifying for families like his had been. His mom had juggled 3 part-time jobs and still avoided doctors because of the bills. He hated that. Technology should make things fairer, he'd say. Not just Chinia. I fell in love with that boy. The one who wanted to fix the world. The one who noticed the new scuffs on my shoes and asked how many double shifts I'd worked. We weren't perfect. He was always late. He forgot plans when he got caught up in code. I snapped at him for living on a schedule only he understood. But he'd show up at my door at midnight with chocolate and guilty eyes. I got lost inside a loop, he'd say, as if that explained everything. And back then it kind of did. If you've ever loved a man's potential harder than he loved his own presence, you know this part of the story already. Before the leaving. Before the break. If some part of you is nodding along, you can hit like or subscribe so these stories find the women who've done the quiet carrying and never once called it sacrifice out loud. It's just our way of saying, you weren't crazy. You were just hoping. The night everything changed wasn't dramatic. No storm, no slammed doors, just a cramped bathroom, a flickering light, and a plastic stick on the edge of the sink. The faucet was dripping. One drop. Twhoa! The second line turned pink so fast it felt like the world skipped a beat. I sat on the closed toilet lid, hands on my knees, heart pounding in my throat. I wasn't naive. We'd been careful except for the one time we weren't. The night his pitch had gone well when he'd spun me around his tiny living room, laughing, saying, "This is it, Annie. This could really work. We could actually get funding. We'd celebrated. We'd been stupid. We'd been in love." Now there were 2 lines. I thought of my bank account, the rent due in 12 days, the degree half finished. I thought of my mother's voice on the phone. "I hope you know what you're doing up there, Annie." I thought of Roy's face when he talked about runway and burn rate and traction. The way his eyes lit up when he said we about his company. I wondered what would happen when that we had a heartbeat. I put the test in my bag. I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. I carried it to his apartment like a confession. He was at his desk, of course. Laptop open, 3 empty cups nearby, 1 sock on, 1 sock off, distracted halfway through getting dressed hours ago and never finishing. "Hey," he said, not looking up. "Give me 2 minutes. I'm just fixing a stupid memory leak before it eats my entire soul." "It can eat it later," I said, trying to sound lighter than I felt. "I need to talk to you." Something in my voice made him glance up. His smile thinned. Okay, that sounds ominous. I sat on the edge of his bed because my legs didn't feel steady enough to hold me. I didn't hand him the test. Instead, I said the words out loud because there's a difference between a pink line and a sentence. Impregnant. Silence. Even the hum of his computer fan seemed to swallow itself. He blinked once. "Twice. Pregnant," he echoed. I nodded. "I took 3 tests. They all how late are you?" He cut in, eyes already darting to the calendar on the wall. Investor call scribbled in 3 different colors. A couple of weeks. Roy, he shot to his feet too fast, chair bumping the wall. Okay, he said, staring at the scattered papers on his desk but not really seeing them. Okay. Okay. Each okay sounded less okay. Say something that isn't okay, I whispered. He turned, and I saw it not cruelty, not disgust. Fear. Annie, he dragged a hand through his hair. The timing. You know where things are. We just got into that accelerator. I'm working 18-hour days. Investors are finally interested. I'm barely holding it together as it is. I know, I said quietly. I work 2 jobs, remember? I'm not exactly swimming in free time either. He winced. That's not what I meant. I know what you meant. He started pacing 4 steps back and forth in front of his desk. A baby, Annie. That's huge. It changes everything. I let out a tight laugh. Thank you for the biology lesson. I'm serious. He stopped, looked at me like he was staring down the rest of his life and didn't like what it did to his pitch deck. What about your degree? What about the plan? We had a plan. No, I thought. You had a plan. I had you. I'm not saying no, he rushed on. I'm just saying we need to think, to be smart. Maybe we wait until the round closes. Once the company is stable, then we can what? I asked. Pick the baby up later? He flinched like I'd slapped him. That's not fair. It's not fair. My voice rose. Roy, this isn't a pitch you can reschedule. This is happening. He sank onto his chair, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. I just need time, he muttered. I need to figure this out. The board, they'll say I'm distracted. They'll question my commitment. We're so close, Annie. If I mess this up now, what? I asked. You'll lose the company? Yes, he said. Maybe, probably. There are a dozen guys waiting to take my place who don't have attachments. Attachments, that's what I was now. What this baby was. I'm not asking you to fix it, I said. I'm telling you reality caught up. He looked up, eyes glassy. I love you. You know that. Do I asked. He crossed the space, knelt in front of me, took my hands. His palms were cold. I do. I swear I do. I just can't think straight right now. Tree. He took a breath. Can we talk about options? Something inside me went very, very still. Options, I repeated. Just talk, he said quickly. I'm not telling you what to do. I would never. But maybe we wait. Maybe this isn't the right time. Once things are settled, we can have a family without it destroying everything we've built. Hearing it from his mouth made something crystal clear. He saw this baby as a threat to his future. I already saw it as my future. I can't undo this, I said softly. And I won't pretend it's not real because your investors might not like it. He squeezed my hands. I'm scared, Annie. So am I. We sat there, fear between us like a third person in the room. He didn't yell. He didn't storm out. He did something worse. He went quiet. Can we just give it a few days? He whispered. Let me get through this week. The demo on Friday is make or break. After that, we'll sit down. We'll really talk, okay? I promise. We'll figure it out. We'll talk later. We'll figure it out later. I wanted to believe him so badly it hurt. So I nodded. Okay, I said. Friday. He kissed my forehead. Friday, he repeated. I love you. Friday never came. Not the way it was supposed to. 2 days later, his phone went straight to voicemail. Then the number stopped working altogether. His email bounced. His apartment was empty when I knocked. A note from the building taped to the door about unit under renovation. On the company website, his smiling face sat under founder and CEO, but the contact form led to nowhere I could reach. I told myself he was busy. I told myself the demo had gone well, that he'd been swept into some high-rise office and lost track of time. I told myself anything except the truth. He had already chosen. By the time my doctor slid the ultrasound wand over my too warm skin and frowned thoughtfully at the screen, my body already knew what my heart wouldn't admit. You said you've been feeling extra tired? She asked gently. Yes, I said, more than I expected. Well, she said, turning the monitor just enough, that might be because you're not carrying one. For a heartbeat, I didn't understand. What do you mean? She pointed at the grainy black and white image. 2 small shapes. 2 flickers. Congratulations, Annie, she said. You're having twins. The room spun just a little. I stared at the screen, at the proof of 2 lives where I'd only planned for one. 2 cribs. 2 car seats. 2 college funds I couldn't imagine starting. 2 heartbeats. No father. I left the office clutching the envelope with the ultrasound pictures. On the bus home, I didn't open it. I just pressed it to my chest. I thought about calling him again, about tracking someone down at his company and demanding they put him on the phone. Then I heard his voice in my head talking about timing and attachments. I saw his face when he said the board would question his commitment. If he couldn't bear the idea of one baby when it might make his life harder, what would he do with two? I pictured my children waiting by a window for a man who always had a good reason not to come. I'd seen that story before. In my own house growing up, on that cracked vinyl bus seat, nausea rolling, two lives fluttering quietly inside me, I made a decision. I would not raise my children to feel like a burden someone had to schedule around. So I didn't tell him. I told myself it was strength. Some nights, pacing the living room with one twin on each shoulder, I wondered if it was fear. But in that moment, it felt like the only way I knew to protect all three of us from his uncertainty, from half measures, from becoming a footnote in his success story. Years later, standing in that clinic hallway with his name on the wall and his eyes on my daughters, the past and present slammed together so hard it took my breath away. He hadn't just left me. He'd stepped out of a whole world he never even knew existed. And now, ready or not, that world was looking back at him. Amanda's footsteps grew louder in the hallway, each one a countdown. Roy's hand was still on the doorframe, but his grip had shifted. It wasn't the confident lean of a man entering his own building. It was the white-knuckled hold of someone who just realized the ground wasn't where he thought it was. He stared at the girls like someone had taken his reflection, split it in two, and given it back to him 10 years late. 10, he said again, voice thin. 10. Olivia slid off the wall, planting her feet like she was bracing for something. Mom, she whispered, who is he? The question sliced straight through the air. There are moments in a woman's life where she can feel the fork in the road under her feet. You know whichever way you lean, there's no going back to before. This was one of those moments. Roy's eyes were on me now, not the CEO gaze that measured outcomes and risks, the old one. The boy in the computer lab who'd handed me his seat and made a joke so I wouldn't feel like a burden. He looked wrecked. Annie, he said, my name rasping out. Are they? He didn't finish. Couldn't. The truth was already standing between us, 5 feet tall in hand-me-down sneakers. I could have softened it. I could have pulled him into the hall, patted the edges, spared the girls the raw version. But I had spent 10 years swallowing my words for the sake of other people's comfort. I wasn't doing that here. Girls, I said, forcing my voice to stay steady, this is Roy. Emma frowned. Like the name on the building? She asked, nodding vaguely toward the logo we'd passed on the way in. He closed his eyes for a second, like that alone might knock him over. Yes, I said, like the name on the building. Olivia's brain moved faster. The one paying for today? She asked. The foundation? Yes. Okay, but why is he in our room? She pressed. And why does he look like us? There it was, the crack. The place where the story I'd built for them no longer covered the whole truth. Roy swallowed, Adam's apple bobbing. You don't get to answer that first, I said quietly, looking at him. Not this time. He stopped, the words dying on his tongue. I turned back to my daughters. He's the man I was with before you were born, I said. My mouth went dry around the next part, but I made myself say it. He's your father. The words sounded strange, like I was trying on a coat I hadn't worn in years. Emma's hand flew to her chest. What? Biologically, I added, because some habits die hard. That's who he is. Olivia blinked, then locked onto him like she was examining a science experiment. Did you know about us? She asked. No softening, no smile. His answer came fast, desperate. No, I didn't know about you. Not that you existed, not for sure. But you knew about something, she said slowly, looking at me out of the corner of her eye. Yes, I said. He knew there was a pregnancy. Her gaze swung back to him. And you left anyway. The room went so quiet I could hear the soft buzz of the fluorescent light. He took a small step forward, catching himself before he got too close. I ran, he said, from responsibility, from fear, from everything that mattered apparently. A humorless huff of breath. You have every right to hate that. To hate me. Emma's eyes were bright and wet. We could have had a dad, she whispered, the whole time. He looked like she'd reached into his chest and squeezed. You should have, he said roughly. You should have had that. That's on me. Not you. Never you. No, I said. They should have had a father who fought to be in their lives. You had a chance to be that. You chose not to. He didn't argue. He didn't try to spin it. He just stood there and let the truth strip him down. If you're watching this thinking, I'd never let him near them after that, or he at least deserved to know, I want you to put it in the comments. Not to fight, just to lay it down. Because women carry these questions alone for years. And if you want more spaces where we can sit with a messy middle instead of pretending life is simple, you can subscribe. Around here, we don't do easy answers. We do honest ones. Olivia folded her arms across her chest, maybe to look tougher, maybe to hold herself together. Why didn't you look for us? She demanded. If you knew there might be someone, he let out a shaky breath. Because I told myself that if your mother wanted me in the picture, she would bang down every door until I listened, he said. I used that as an excuse not to go looking. I told myself a story where I was less guilty that way. His gaze flicked to me. It was wrong, cowardly, but it's the truth. You disappeared, I said, changed your number, moved, took yourself off the map. Don't pretend you left the door unlocked. He nodded, shame plain on his face. I locked it, he admitted, and then acted surprised when no one walked through. Emma sniffled. Do you have other kids? She asked, almost like she was bracing for one more hurt. No, he said quickly. No, just you two. Because you didn't want any, Olivia said. Or because you already messed this up once? His answer was simple. Because after I ran from the chance of you, I didn't trust myself with anyone else's heart, he said. And I didn't deserve another shot while I was still telling myself the old story. The door opened a crack. Amanda slipped in, eyes widening at the tension still thick in the air. Everything okay in here? She asked carefully. Complicated, I said, but we're managing. She nodded slowly, handing me a clipboard. Doctor will be right in, she murmured, then backed out again. As the door clicked shut, Roy looked at me, really looked, past the anger, past his guilt, to something else. Annie, he said, voice low, I know I don't deserve it, but I need to ask, why didn't you tell me? Not about whether I earned it. Just why? The question came out raw. No strategy. No spin. In another life I might have softened, patted his hand, said you were young and let him off the hook. In this life I had spent 10 years in the space he left, because you taught me exactly how much room I had in your life when I told you I was pregnant, I said. Because you made it clear your company, your investors, your reputation, all of that came first. Because when I saw 2 heartbeats on that screen, your number was already gone. His shoulders flinched with each word. And I wasn't going to raise my daughters hoping for scraps of your attention between board meetings, I finished. So I chose certainty, even if that certainty was just me. He stood there, all his money, all his titles, all his stories about himself stripped away, and for once he didn't try to fix it with words. He just finally let it break him. You can't buy back 10 years, but you can stand in a cramped exam room and feel every missing day crowd the air. Doctor. Michaels came in moments later, the kind of man whose calm had been tested by enough midnight emergencies to make it real. He glanced between our faces, then went straight to Emma. Okay, young lady, he said gently, let's see what's going on with that cough. Exams are strangely intimate when your heart is already in pieces. Stethoscope on her back. Deep breath in and out. Cool tongue depressor. Say ah for me. Gentle pressure under her ribs. Any pain here? Emma obeyed without complaint, eyes flicking to me after every instruction like she was checking I was still there. Olivia hovered close to the wall, arms crossed, tracking every move. Roy sat in the corner chair silent, stripped of all his usual power. No board to convince. No numbers to massage. Just his daughter's breath, too shallow and too loud. Her lungs sound a bit tight, doctor. Michael said after a minute, eyes on the computer screen as he typed. How long has this been going on? A couple of weeks, I said. Worse at night. The inhaler helps, but I trailed off. But not enough. He finished for me, nodding. Given her history, I want to adjust things. New inhaler, higher dose. And we're going to add a controller, not just rescue. The words new and add landed in my chest like weights. New meant money. Add meant more of it. He must have seen something flash across my face. The visit is covered today, he said. And there are assistance options for the meds. Talk to Amanda before you leave. We'll figure it out. I nodded, throat tight. Okay, thank you. When he stepped out, the room exhaled with him. We were left with a printout on the counter and the sound of Emma's small cough echoing in the corners. Roy stood suddenly, like he couldn't bear the distance. I can take care of the medications, he blurted. All of it. Specialists, treatments, whatever she needs. No. The word came out sharper than I meant, but I didn't take it back. He blinked. Annie, I know exactly what you can afford, I said. That's not the point. This isn't a bill you get to pay to erase guilt. His jaw worked. I'm not trying to erase you've lived a long time in a world where money fixes things, I interrupted. Staffing problems, PR problems, funding gaps. But this, I gestured to Emma, to Olivia, to the space between us, is not that. Emma glanced between us, confusion and hope warring on her face. But the medicine, she whispered. You will get your medicine, I said immediately, turning to her. That is not up for debate. We will move heaven and earth if we have to. But your health is not a bargaining chip in anyone's redemption arc. Not even his. Her shoulders dropped a fraction. She nodded, trusting that. Roy swallowed hard. I'm not trying to buy them, he said. I'm trying to contribute, for once. Then you'll use the same channels everyone else does, I said. If there's a patient assistance fund and it helps families, we might use it. But not as a private favor, not as something they owe you for. He flinched. I wouldn't, maybe you wouldn't now, I said. But we're not building this on maybe. We're building it on rules. Olivia finally spoke up, voice edged. Do you give money like this to a lot of kids? She asked. Is that what this place is? Guilt with a reception desk? It was a brutal question. It was also honest. He took it, shoulders sagging. At first, he admitted, yes, I told myself I was doing good, and I was. But I was also trying to quiet something I didn't want to look at. I thought if I helped enough strangers, maybe it would count for something. Like extra credit, she said flatly. Exactly like that, he said, with no attempt to defend it. But it doesn't work that way. I know that now. If you've ever had someone wave money or grand gestures in your face when what you really needed was consistency and eye contact, you understand this part too well. If you're done with apologies that come with price tags, tap subscribe. This channel is for women who know the difference between being bought and being chosen. He turned back to me, voice lower. So what does it look like then? He asked. If there's any path at all, what do you need from me? There was a time when nothing would have flown out of my mouth on instinct. Shut the door, bolt it, live in the certainty of 3 instead of the mess of 4. But certainty has a cost, too. I need you to understand there is no magic moment where you're suddenly dad, I said. There's no Christmas, no big gift, no clinic wing that gives you that word back. Emma's eyes flickered at the word. Olivia's jaw tightened. For now, you're Roy, I continued. A man who hurt me, a man who didn't know about them, a man who funds a clinic that today is keeping my daughter's lungs working. He nodded slowly, like he was writing it down on his soul. Okay, you do not show up at our home unannounced. You do not introduce yourself as their father at school without asking them first. You don't post pictures to prove anything to anyone. You don't use them as some kind of testimonial, he winced. You don't get points for what you wouldn't do, I said. You get points for what you actually do. Over time, when no one is clapping, he exhaled. No promis, no titles, no assumptions. Just show up when I say I will, and leave when they're tired, I added, even if you're not ready, especially then. He nodded again. Deal. Emma swung her legs, the paper under her crinkling. Then, what is he to us? She asked, not looking at him. For now, I said, he's someone you're just meeting, someone from my past. Someone who might have a place in your future if, and this is important, you decide you want that. Olivia raised her hand a little like we were in class. Do we have to see him? No, I said immediately. You don't have to do anything you're not ready for. You get a say in this, both of you. Roy's eyes shone at that and broke a little too. If you never want to see me again, he said softly, I'll respect it. I'll keep doing what I can from a distance. But I won't force my way in. And if we do? Emma asked, voice small. Then I'll stay, he said. Not perfectly, not without mistakes. But I will stay, even when you're mad, especially when you're mad. He looked at me like he was asking silently, is this enough to start with? I didn't nod, but I didn't shut it down either. Just then, Emma's cough, the one that had been simmering all morning, spiked. It ripped through her like a wave, folding her forward, hand clutching at her ribs. Hey, I murmured, lunging to her side, one hand on her back. The inhaler in my bag gave one thin, pathetic wheeze when I tried it. Nearly empty. Fear slammed into me, old and familiar. Not again. Not like this. Olivia went pale. Mom? Get Amanda, I said, my voice too calm for what I felt. Now. The door flew open before she moved. Amanda took one look and went straight for the cabinet. Let's get you some help, sweetheart, she said to Emma, pulling out the nebulizer. You came on the right day. As the machine hummed to life and mist began to swirl in the mask, Roy stood uselessly by the wall, hands shaking, horror plain on his face. He'd built a clinic, funded care, wrote checks with more zeros than I'd see in a lifetime. But watching his daughter fight for breath in a cheap vinyl chair, he finally learned the one lesson his money had never taught him. You can throw everything you have at the world. You still can't buy back the night you weren't there to hold the mask. The first time I understood how thin the line was between we're managing and we're in trouble was a Tuesday night that started like any other. The girls were in bed. The TV murmured low in the background, one of those reruns that kept you company without asking for attention. The apartment was finally quiet, dishes drying in the rack, backpacks lined up by the door, tomorrow's clothes piled on the chair I kept meaning to clear. I should have gone to sleep. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table with a stack of envelopes and a $10 calculator, trying to convince numbers that didn't like each other to be friends. The first cough was soft. The second was not. By the third, my body was down the hallway before my brain caught up. Their room was dim, lit by the small nightlight that cast shadows of stuffed animals across the walls. Olivia was on her side, arm flung over her head, breathing slow and even. Emma lay on her back, eyes squeezed shut, both hands pressed to her chest. The sound coming out of her wasn't a normal cough. It was tight, wheezing, like someone had put a belt around her lungs and pulled. "Hey, baby," I whispered, flipping on the lamp. "Talk to me. What's going on?" She tried to answer and folded into a hacking fit instead, shoulders jerking, each inhale scraping. "Okay," I said, already reaching for the inhaler. "You know the drill. Sit up for me." Her eyes flew open wide and panicked. "Mom," she gasped. "It hurts." I know I lied. "Deep breath. We've got you." The inhaler hissed when I pressed it. One puff. 3. I counted the way the nurse had taught me. Slow breaths. In. Out. Olivia stirred, blinking awake. Em was out of bed in a heartbeat, bare feet on the cold floor. "Mom, get the extra pillow in her water bottle," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Now." We tried what we knew. Inhaler, sitting her upright, cooling her forehead. The cough kept climbing, clawing. "It's not working," Emma choked. My heart slammed against my ribs. The room felt smaller with every breath she couldn't quite catch. There's a moment between scared and this is no longer safe. You don't get a siren in your head, just a quiet knowing. "Shoes," I said. "Both of you, hoodies. We're going." The ER, Olivia's voice shook. "Yes." The rideshare app felt like it took years to open. My fingers were clumsy on the screen. Keys, wallet, insurance card. Inhaler shoved in my pocket anyway, like a talisman. By the time we reached the curb, Emma was hunched over, each breath a battle. The night air was damp and cold, burning on the way in. Olivia held her up on one side, I took the other. The driver's eyes widened when he saw her, but he opened the door without comment. The city blurred past, neon and streetlights smearing together. I watched Emma's chest the entire ride. Inside the ER, everything smelled like antiseptic and fatigue. The fluorescent lights were too bright. The plastic chairs shone with that particular shine of things wiped down 1,000 times and never truly clean. 10 years old, asthma history, difficulty breathing. I said in one rushing sentence at the intake desk. Inhaler not helping. They took one look at her and waved us through. Paperwork could wait. Breath couldn't. Pulse ox clip on her tiny finger. Blood pressure cuff. Oxygen mask. Nurses moving fast but not frantic, the way people do when they're scared but trained. "How long has she been like this?" one asked, adjusting the mask. "Worse in the last 20 minutes, I said. "But the cough. It's been hanging on." Emma's eyes were glassy, tracking me. Every instinct I had screamed to be calm for her, to act like this was normal, like we were just here to get a tune-up. Inside, I was unraveling. "Mom," Olivia whispered from the corner, arms wrapped around herself, backpack still on. "Is she going to be okay?" "She's in the right place," I said. It was the only thing I could promise. The nebulizer hummed. Mist filled the mask. Emma's shoulders rose and fell under my hand. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Once, twice, 3 times. "Mom," Olivia said, nodding toward it. "It might be something." I pulled it out with my free hand. A string of messages lit the screen. "Are you okay?" I got an ER intake alert for Emma. "Are you at the hospital?" Please tell me where you are. Droy, of course. His name was still tied to the Foundation systems. Of course there were alerts. One more text came in as I stared at the screen. I know I have no right, but I'm coming anyway. You don't have to talk to me. I just need to know she's breathing. If this had been 10 years earlier, I might have thrown the phone back in my bag. I might have decided I'd rather handle the fear alone than share it with the man who'd once walked away from it. But my daughter's breath was catching under my palm. Pride is a luxury sick children can't afford. It's Saint Jude, I typed. No punctuation, no extra words. Sent, and went back to counting her breaths. If you've ever stood in a hospital hallway or sat up all night by a bed and thought, if anything goes wrong, it's all on me, you're not the only one. If you don't want to carry stories like that alone anymore, you can subscribe or share this with one woman who'd get it without you having to explain. Sometimes Me Too is the only kind of medicine we have to give each other. He got there faster than I expected. No entourage, no perfect suit. Just jeans, a t-shirt, hair mashed like he'd run his hands through it too many times in one car ride. He spotted Olivia first. She was the only 10-year-old in the waiting area, gripping a backpack strap like it was a lifeline, eyes fixed on the swinging doors. "Olivia," he breathed, crossing the room. "Is she?" She stiffened, then jerked her chin toward the curtained area. "Back there," she said. Asthma bad, his face went white. "Will they let me in?" he asked. "Or should I wait with you?" She hesitated, torn between old hurt and new reality. "They let me in 'cause I'm the sibling," she said. "You can try being family." He didn't flinch at the weight of that word. "Only if it's okay with your mom," he said. "If it's not, I stay right here." A nurse lifted the curtain a moment later. "You're with Emma?" she asked. "He is," I said. It surprised both of us. "Two," she said. "One extra. Stay out of the way." He slipped in, and for the first time in his life, the most powerful man in the room was a woman with a stethoscope and sensible shoes. He saw her then. Small, masked, hooked up to wires. Whatever stories he told himself about his good works and his foundations melted off his face. "Hey," he said, voice breaking, coming to the far side of the bed. "Heard you decided to test drive the hospital equipment." Emma turned her head a fraction, eyes heavy. "Hi," she breathed. "You picked a very dramatic way to get my attention," he said softly. She managed the tiniest eye roll. "You?" "Got an alert," she rasped. "Cheating." He let out a short, broken laugh. "Guilty." The doctor checked the monitor again. "She's responding," he said. "Slowly. We'll keep her a while." Slowly. The most beautiful and terrifying word. Roy sank into the plastic chair by the curtain, elbows on his knees, fingers knotted. He didn't pull out his phone. He didn't start making calls. He watched her breathe. Every rise. Every fall. And for the first time, regret looked like something other than a speech. It looked like a man who could not stop thinking, what if I had been here sooner for everything? Hours blurred. The numbers on the monitor edged back into the safe zone. Her chest eased. The nurse loosened the mask enough for her to sip water through a straw. "She's stable," the doctor finally said. "We'll observe a bit longer, then discharge if she stays like this." Stable. Not fine, but not in danger. My knees went weak with it. Roy's shoulders collapsed, some invisible armor dropping. He put his head in his hands and exhaled a sound that was half prayer, half apology. In the corner, Olivia watched him with a new, uncomfortable kind of focus. She'd seen men cry on screens. She'd never seen this one cry in real life. When the doctor left, she dropped into the chair next to him. "You okay?" she asked, the question absurd and generous at the same time. He huffed a laugh. "I don't think I've earned the right to say no tonight," he said. "But no. Not really." She looked back at the bed, then at him. "Are you going to leave again?" she asked. The question rang in that narrow space, louder than any monitor. He lifted his head slowly, met her eyes, then looked at me, then at Emma. Whatever he said next would draw a line through all of us. He didn't answer right away. The ER had quieted. The loudest sounds now were the soft beeping of the monitor and Emma's slower, steadier breaths. "Are you going to leave again?" Olivia repeated. Less child, more jury. He sat with it. Not the way people do when they're buying time to come up with a clever line, but the way someone does when they finally understand the stakes of their own words. "I left once," he said finally. "That's the truest thing about me. I ran when your mother needed me. I disappeared when there was a chance you already existed." "I can't edit that out." "That's not an answer," she said quietly. A flicker of something respect maybe crossed his face. "No," he agreed. It's not. He pushed himself up from the chair, crossed the small distance to her, then did something I had never seen him do in any boardroom photo or interview clip. Hey, Knelt. One knee on scuffed hospital tile, one hand on his other knee. No show, no performance. Just a man choosing to be smaller so he could look his child in the eye. I can't promise I'll never mess up again, he said. I'm human. I say the wrong thing. I get scared. We noticed, Olivia muttered. He nodded. Yeah, I'm late to a lot of truths. He took a breath. What I can promise is this. I will not use leaving as my way out anymore. Not when it's hard. Not when I feel like I'm failing. Not when you're angry. That door is shut for me. Olivia studied him, weighing not just the words, but the weight behind them. You don't get credit for saying it, she said. Only for doing it. Over and over. You're right, he said. This isn't a one-time vow. It's every Tuesday, every school pickup, every time you text and I want to pretend I'm too busy. A small, self-mocking smile. You're allowed to hold me to it. From the bed, a soft voice croaked, Why, are you on the floor? Emma was awake again, eyes clearer now, watching them. He turned, smile pulling at the corners of his mouth. Turns out I belong down here for this part, he said. You look weird, she said. I feel weird, he admitted. Maybe that's a good sign. Comfortable made me stupid the first time. She tugged the mask down just enough to make herself understood. Are you crying a little, he said. Good, she whispered. We cried a lot. He flinched, the words landing deep. She watched him a moment longer. Do you still want to know us? She asked. After all this? More than anything, he said without hesitation. Even if it's hard. Especially if it's hard. Even if we're mad? She pressed. Especially then, he said. That's when most people leave. I've been most people for a long time. I'm done with that. Something in my chest shifted at that. A hairline crack in the wall I'd spent a decade building. If you're here, still listening to this, there's probably a part of you that believes people can change, and a louder part that remembers every time they didn't. If you've ever wrestled with, do I let them try again, or do I stay safe? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Not advice, just your truth. And if you want more stories that sit right in that tension instead of pretending it's easy, you can hit subscribe. Around here, we honor both the woman who forgives and the one who walks away. A nurse came in, checked Emma's vitals, adjusted the flow. She's looking good, she said. Keep that mask on a bit longer, okay, kiddo? Emma nodded, eyes already drooping. It was nearly dawn when they finally discharged us. The sky outside was that washed-out blue that comes after a long, hard night. The air had a bite to it. Birds were just starting to argue in the trees. We stepped out onto the damp concrete steps, me, two girls in oversized hoodies, and a man who looked like he'd aged 10 years in one night. Okay, I said, exhaling. Game plan. We go home. We sleep. No decisions today. No big declarations. Just toast and cartoons and breathing. Emma yawned, clutching her discharge papers. Olivia shoved her hands deep in her pockets. Roy hovered a step below us like he wasn't sure he was allowed on the same level. Can I at least walk you to the car? He asked. Yes, I said. Walk. Then you go home and do whatever men like you do when the world tips over. Mostly stare at the ceiling and make spreadsheets that don't help, he said. Good, I replied. You deserve a few useless spreadsheets. We started down the steps. At the bottom, as the rideshare pulled to the curb, Olivia turned back to him. Say it again, she said. He frowned. Say what? The answer, she said, to my question. There was no ER chaos now. No machines. Just weak morning light, an empty sidewalk, and three people whose lives had been split into before tonight and after. He looked at them. Then, without glancing around to see who might be watching, he sank down onto one knee again, the concrete damp enough to soak his jeans. I left once, he said quietly. I will regret that for the rest of my life, but I will not leave again. Not when it's hard. Not when I'm scared. Not when I don't know what I'm doing. He took a breath. I can't promise I'll be perfect. I can promise I'll be here, where you can find me. Every time, Emma's eyes filled. We'll remember, she said. I'm counting on it, he replied. Later, in the back seat, watching him shrink in the rearview mirror as the car pulled away, a thought slid into my mind, unwelcome and undeniable. Maybe I wasn't just protecting them all these years from disappointment, from absence, from men who say later and mean never. Maybe I'd been protecting myself from the terrifying possibility that, if given the chance, someone might actually stay. Showing up isn't glamorous. It doesn't get a plaque on the wall. It looks like early alarms, awkward silences, and a man in a wrinkled shirt sitting in the back row of a school auditorium praying his name doesn't get called. For Roy, it started small. 3 days after the ER, he sent one text at 2:07 p.m. Coffee, public, your terms, no paragraphs, no speeches. No, I've changed. I stared at it in the laundry room, the dryer rattling like it might give up at any second. Emma's sock stuck to my arm with static. My first instinct was to delete it. My second was to say yes and drag him over hot coals. Instead, I answered, Saturday, 10 a.m., Cafe on Maple. You're early or you're gone. His reply came fast. I'll be early. He was. When I walked in that Saturday, the bell over the cafe door jingling, he was already there. No laptop, no phone on the table, just a mug that had gone cold and a man who looked like sleep was something that happened to other people. I didn't order for you, he said. Figured you've had enough of men deciding what you need. It was a small sentence. It mattered. We talked like people who shared a house once and then found out it had burned down. Boundaries first. He didn't get the twin school schedule without my say-so. He didn't get drop-in privileges. No surprise visits. No, I was in the neighborhood. I need to know, I told him, that when you show up, it's because you chose to, not because your phone beeped with some system alert. I had them remove your file from anything that pings me, he said quietly. I'll know about you when you tell me, not before. He didn't argue when I said the girls set the pace. He didn't push when I admitted I still didn't know what I wanted from him beyond co-parenting basics. That's fair, he said. I lost the right to ask you for more a long time ago. The strange thing was he sounded like he believed it. The first time he came to school, he followed the rules. Parent-teacher conferences, fluorescent lights, stale coffee, bad folding chairs. He waited in the hallway like any other parent whose name wasn't on the custody forms. When Olivia and I came out of her math conference, he was standing by the trophy case, pretending to be fascinated by a faded picture of the 2009 basketball team. How'd it go? He asked. Olivia shrugged, trying to be cool. They think I'm good at math, she said. Of course you are, he replied. You budgeted our hypothetical clinic staff party better than my finance team. She fought a smile and lost, just a little. I only moved the snacks column, she muttered. Vital work, he said solemnly. You don't mess with snacks. He didn't push to talk to the teacher. He didn't step in front of me. He just walked with us down the hall, quiet, absorbing. At the clinic, the changes were quieter. The shiny plaque in the lobby that once read, "The Belliary Foundation made this possible," disappeared. In its place, a simple line, community funded. Si, omama, yunu, itisa, butto. When I found him later in a cramped back office that looked like it had been reclaimed from a storage closet, I nodded toward the lobby. You took your name down, I said. It never should have been up, he replied. I kept saying this place wasn't about me. Took me a while to act like I believed it. He started showing up on days without cameras, stalking exam rooms, sitting in community feedback circles with his notebook, writing far more than he spoke. A young mother told him the 8 a.m. Pediatric slots made no sense when the first bus didn't even reach her stop until 7:45. 2 weeks later, the clinic opened earlier and stayed later. No fanfare. Just different hours on the door. With the girls, his progress was messier. Hot chocolate Saturdays at the cafe up the street. My seat 2 tables away. Book open, ears quietly tuned. He didn't interrogate them. He didn't perform. He asked about their lives like someone who understood he was joining a story already in progress. So, defense in soccer, he said to Olivia. You like ruining other people's plans? She smirked. A little. You'd be great in risk management, he said. Or on a board. Same skill set. Sounds boring, she said. That's what they all think, he replied. Until they realize they can say no to terrible ideas. Emma tested him harder. What's my favorite color? She demanded on their second outing. He frowned. You wear a lot of yellow, he said. But that might just be to annoy your sister. Wrong, she said. It's teal. I wear yellow to annoy her. He grinned. I stand corrected. Teal it is. She folded her arms. Don't fake get stuff wrong so we feel smart, she added. We actually are smart. You are, he agreed. Noted. Only genuine mistakes from here on out. You'll have plenty of material. Trust built in fits and starts. The night Olivia texted him about a math graph she showed me after, pretending not to care what I thought. Do you know anything about data graphs? His answer, tragically, yes. Want to make one so good your teacher questions her life choices? She snorted, telling me. He made standard deviation make sense, she said. YouTube never does that. The first time Emma called him without warning, I walked in to find her on speakerphone, up to her elbows in baking soda and vinegar foam. My volcano is leaking out the side, she said. It's not supposed to do that. Ah, he answered. You've discovered structural failure. Proud of you. Let's patch it before your kitchen becomes Pompeii. She grinned at me when she hung up. He knew what to do, she said. YouTube would have just said oops. Through it all I watched. At first like a guard dog. Then slowly like someone trying to reconcile two photographs of the same person taken years apart. He didn't ask for absolution. He asked for schedules, for clear rules, for correction when he stepped wrong, and every time I expected him to retreat at the first sign of conflict, he stayed. Awkward, uncertain, present. Showing up, it turns out, speaks louder than any apology. Chapter 8, This Is Our Dad's Spring, came in a rush. 1 week the trees were bare. The next they were suddenly heavy with green, like they'd decided overnight that winter had wasted enough of their time. It was a Friday pickup. The kind of warm afternoon where kids ran out of the school doors like they'd been fired from a cannon. Parents clustered near the gate, talking work and groceries and weekend plans. Staff waved clipboards and shouted reminders about permission slips. Somebody's little brother cried over a dropped ice cream. I stood in my usual spot by the fence where I'd stood 100 times before. My post. Mi ritual. My proof. Roy was there too, not next to me, a little off to the side, by the bike rack, hands in his jacket pockets, watching the doors. If you didn't know our story, you'd think he was just another dad waiting his turn. The 5th grade doors opened. A flood of backpacks and ponytails and untied shoes poured out. I spotted them immediately. You always do. Olivia, taller now, hair pulled back in a half-done style she swore was efficient. Emma, hoodie half-zipped, one shoelace dragging like always. Their eyes found me first. Then, almost in the same breath, they found him. "Mom, he's here," Emma murmured, nudging her sister. Olivia followed her gaze. For a second I saw the old caution cross her face. Then I watched her make a decision in real time. They didn't come straight to me. They veered toward him. He straightened, hands sliding out of his pockets, then stopping halfway like he remembered again that they set the distance. "Hey," he said, "you two survived the spelling test?" "Barely," Olivia said. She spelled mischievous like mischievous and started a class war. "It's a conspiracy," Emma insisted. "There's an extra syllable in my soul." He laughed. "Honestly, I'm on your side." Parents moved past them in a steady stream, glancing at the three of them without really seeing. I started forward, then stopped. For 10 years, I'd stepped into every gap, interpreted every look, controlled every introduction. What if I didn't just this once? "Olivia," the voice cut in from my right. Mrs. Kaplan walking up with her son, Jonah. She'd been in their class orbit for years, PTA meetings, bake sales, the usual. "Hey there," she said, smiling at my girls. Then her eyes landed on Roy. "And who's this?" A simple question, a landmine. Olivia glanced at Emma. A whole conversation passed between them in that look. She turned back to Mrs. Kaplan. Her shoulders lifted, settled. Her voice didn't shake. "This is our dad," she said. "Hoi." The word hung there small, enormous, casual, life-altering. "Hoor dad." Not the man who, not "this is Roy," long story. "Whost dad?" Roy went very still. He did not correct her. He did not add, "Well, I'm trying to be," or biologically, yes. He just stood there and let the word land on his shoulders. "Nice to finally meet you, Mrs." Kaplan said, shaking his hand like it was the most normal thing in the world. "We've only been hearing about these two for, 6 years now?" He smiled, the expression a little stunned around the edges. "The reviews have been generous, I hope." "Depends who you ask," Emma said. "I'm the favorite." "In your own mind," Olivia shot back. They bickered, Mrs. Kaplan laughed, and the world kept spinning. Cars moved up. Teachers waved. Someone's dog tried to eat a drop sandwich. No one around us knew that an entire axis had just shifted. I was close enough now to step in, to clarify, to reclaim the narrative. I didn't. For once I chose silence. Not the silence I'd known for 11 years, the kind stuffed with things unsaid. A different kind. A silence that said, this is their moment, their definition, their word. I would not be the one to take it back. When Mrs. Kaplan and Jonah moved on. We were left in a bubble. Emma slipped her hand into Roy's without ceremony, fingers tangling with his. Olivia drifted back toward me, shoulder bumping mine. "Hey," I said. "Hey," he answered. The girls stood between us, one anchored to each side, like we were the ends of a bridge they were finally willing to walk across. I looked at him over their heads. His eyes were wet. His smile was small and stunned. But there was something else there, too. Understanding. Not pride at being called Dad. Not victory. Just responsibility. He knew that moment wasn't about him being redeemed. It was about them claiming a word for themselves. On the walk to the parking lot, Emma talked about field day like there was nothing unusual about the four of us walking together. Olivia argued with her about relay teams. Roy carried both their backpacks without thinking. For the first time, the story in my head wasn't looping on. He left. He left. He left. It had made room for another sentence. He's here. They chose that word. I let it stand. And that, more than any apology he'd ever offered, changed what came next. Chapter 9. Not a fairy tale, but a family by the time the leaves turned again. The clinic lobby looked different. The same scuffed tiles. The same humming vending machine in the corner. The same cartoon lion still bossing kids about hand-washing. But the bulletin board told a new story. Flyers translated into the languages actually spoken in the waiting room. Handwritten notes about which bus lines ran late and which drivers would wait those extra 15 seconds for a mom hustling with a stroller. A schedule for home visits run by a mix of nurses, social workers, and 2 retired grandmothers who had declared themselves the cavalry. I knew the ink stains on half those papers. My name was on some of the internal memos now. Outreach coordinator, part-time, paid. I hadn't taken the job for him. I'd taken it for every woman I'd seen sitting where I'd sat, trying to fill out forms with one hand while soothing a sick child with the other. He understood that. We worked surprisingly well together. He lived in spreadsheets and projections. I lived in bus routes and grocery budgets. Somewhere in the middle, the programs got better. We argued about resource allocation, about which pilot projects should go first, about whether donors would balk at less shiny initiatives. Donors love equipment, he said once. Machines, brakes. Machines don't get kids to appointments, I replied. Gas cards do. Bus vouchers do. Flexible hours do. He rubbed his jaw, thinking. You're right, he said, so we make a case they can't say no to. You give me the stories. I'll translate them into their language and then back into money. It became a pattern. He'd bring the data. I bring the daily reality. We'd meet in the middle before decisions got made. At home, or whatever counted as home for a 2-household family that still mostly rotated around my apartment there, was a rhythm now. Sunday nights, a shared calendar on the fridge and on his phone. Practices, conferences, deadlines. Who's where when with whom no longer lived exclusively in my head. Wednesday afternoons, his pickup day, unless the world was on fire. It wasn't perfect. Sometimes meetings ran over. Sometimes traffic was bad. But the difference now was he didn't hide that from the girls or from me. If he was running late, he said so. Out loud, in time to fix it. The girls learned his patterns the way they'd once learned only mine. Call him, Olivia would say when a science fair was looming. He'll overcomplicate it, but it'll get an A. Text Mom, Emma would add when feelings got big. She'll actually understand why I want to burn the poster. We were not some seamless blended unit. Old wounds flared. One night, after a snippy exchange about curfews, Olivia muttered, "You don't get to suddenly act like you've always been here." Everyone in the room froze. He could have lectured her about respect. He could have snapped, "I'm trying. What more do you want?" Like so many parents do when guilt bleeds into defensiveness. He didn't. "You're right," he said instead, voice steady. "I haven't always been here. I missed 10 years' worth of curfew talks. I'm going to get this wrong while I learn. You're allowed to be mad about that." She blinked, thrown off. "That's not how this conversation usually goes," she said cautiously. "Good," he replied. The old way didn't work. Later, when he'd gone home and the dishes were done, she climbed into my bed, curled on her side, and whispered, "I think he might mean it." "You don't have to decide that all at once," I said. "You get to watch." "I am," she murmured, "every day." Forgiveness, when it came, did not look like a white dress or a dramatic reunion hug. It looked like small things. Emma falling asleep with her feet in his lap during a movie night and him not shifting once, even when his leg went numb. Olivia texting him first when she got an A on a project and me second. Me realizing I could miss one school email and not spiral because there was someone else reading the same messages and caring as much. One night, months into this new life, he stood in my tiny kitchen after dropping the girls off. The apartment smelled like popcorn and slightly burnt cookies. The table was covered in homework and art supplies. The fridge was a collage of crooked magnets and photo strips. "Can I say something without you throwing a spoon at me?" he asked. "No promises," I said. He smiled, then sobered. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness," he said. "Not as a transaction. Not as something I can earn back like revenue. That's not how it works." I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "I'm listening. I wake up most mornings," he went on, "and there's a few seconds where I forget. Then I remember I have 2 daughters who are 10 and know how to roll their eyes better than most adults, and a woman who lets me stand in her kitchen without calling security. It feels undeserved. Like I'm living on borrowed grace." "You are," I said. "Well, the trick is not cashing it in like a coupon. It's treating it like a very fragile, very precious loan." He nodded, looking at the floor. "I don't expect you to ever forget what I did," he said. "If I were you, I don't know if I could." "I won't," I said. "Forgetting is how people repeat their own history. I remember all of it." I let the silence sit a minute, then added, "But remembering doesn't mean I have to live inside that moment forever." He looked up, surprised. "I don't think of you first as the man who left anymore," I said slowly. "I think of you as the girl's dad, who also left once. The order matters." His eyes filled, the admission hitting him harder than any tearful apology ever hit me. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I won't waste that reorder." After he left, I stood in the doorway for a long moment, listening to the echo of the latch clicking behind him, the girls in their room arguing about whether glitter was a basic human right. For so long, my story had ended on the note of his leaving. It was where the chapter cut off, where the sympathy lived. Single mom, twins, absent father, strong, tired heroine. But that wasn't where the story ended anymore. It wasn't even the most interesting part. What mattered now was the messy, ordinary, hard-won middle. The clinic that used to have his name on the wall now had a community's fingerprints all over it. The man who once measured his worth in valuation rounds now measured it, at least in part, in Wednesday pickups and field day attendance. The woman who swore she'd never let him close enough to hurt her again had let him close enough to help carry what she'd been holding alone. Not because destiny demanded it. Not because some cosmic script said this is how it must go. Because day after day, all 4 of us kept making small, stubborn choices. He chose to show up. I chose to let the door stay cracked. They chose to call him Dad and watch what he did with the weight of it. It was not a fairy tale. There was no castle. No moment when everything broke and magically unbroke. No perfect, clean, happy ever after. What we had was better than that. We had a family that knew exactly what it had survived, a man who understood the cost of his absence and the work of his presence. 2 girls who would grow up knowing that love is not just what someone promises you in the glow of a computer screen, and cheap coffee, it's what they prove at school gates, in ER rooms, and on boring Tuesday nights. And me. Not the girl on the bus with an envelope pressed to her chest, terrified and alone. Not just the woman in the clinic waiting room, shaking at the sound of an old name. But someone who had watched a story shatter, then stayed long enough to see what could be built from the pieces. If you're listening to this, waiting for a sign that your own story could be more than the moment it broke, let this be it. Some endings aren't endings at all. They're just the place where you finally stop living on promises and start building on choices.